Hello. I'm outdoors, obviously. I like a natural backdrop whenever possible. It is early in the fall, and the leaves are beginning to turn. This is the 13th episode of Spark the Why, a continuation from the previous episode. In this one, I speak to a sign. Initially, I was hesitant to bring this up. I'm inherently skeptical, but I also don't want to ignore something just because I cannot explain it. It is a very tricky balancing act between doubt and belief. In either case of too much belief or too much doubt, there is a kind of rigidity of viewpoint. If you are a true believer, you can require or demand that others must have a view just like yours, or else they are heretic. If you operate from a very strict doubting mindset, you might miss out on something rather sublime and inspiring that may happen to come along. Both of these rigid views can function like blinders for the mind, in the way that a racehorse needs blinders to stay focused on the race. There is also the problem that our fast-paced lifestyles tend to induce this kind of thing, for if we allow ourselves to become distracted for too long, we are left behind and out of the race. But where is this race taking us? Is there some overarching point to it all? For the most part, I think humans are just dragged along because what is the alternative? You've got to hustle just to keep your roof over your head and keep food on the table. If you have dependents, you are almost by default caught up in the race. It's not easy to be a self-styled and largely self-educated philosopher within this social context. Even professional philosophers with a doctorate must wonder at times where they fit in this world. In the race, everything must demonstrate a return on investment, or else it's off to the glue factory. Doubt can be debilitating, especially if there is too much of it. This doubt that I am referring to is the self-doubt variety, as opposed to the doubt mentioned earlier, which is the doubting mind of the skeptic, the mind that needs hard evidence before it will accept that something is real. Self-doubt will creep into your life when you are forced to endure significant change. In our present world, there is a lot of significant change impinging on people's lives. For example, there is disruptive technology, the kind we use every day in the digital universe, and the kind that makes so many jobs obsolete in the modern factory. This technology is also continuing to disrupt. It doesn't reach a point and stop. And with the evolving algorithm and machine learning, we are seeing the early awakenings of AI, or artificial intelligence, which is likely to see a great many more jobs become obsolete. There are other disruptions too, like geopolitical instabilities driving an exodus of people, which is also intertwined with climate change as it wreaks havoc, often among some of the world's most vulnerable people. All of this disruptive change has birthed or rebirthed the resurgent populism. If you have felt too much anxiety and self-doubt yourself, you may find yourself agreeing, at least in part, to the message of this populism. If, on the other hand, you are fairly comfortable and have reasonably weathered the storms of disruptive change, you might simply want to tune all of the seeming chaos and wall yourself off, and or distract yourself with more pleasant things while huddled within your cocoon of safety. There is a third response to significant change, and this is perhaps the rarest form. That is not a value judgment, because it is likely that in our overly busy, racing all the time lives, only a very small minority would even be predisposed to this way of reacting to the changes. Such a person would almost necessarily have felt that they were an outsider, never really belonging in this made world in the first place. Such a person would therefore be more likely to ask questions, and always having been something of an outsider anyway, could likely deal with significant change without wanting to join a populist movement, or, at the same time, resisting the urge to wall up in the cocoon. Know anyone like this? I'll bet you do.
Even the person that asks questions, though, can become discouraged. You can get to a point in wondering if there even is a point. You can have a version of self-doubt, thinking maybe the questioning of things itself is self-indulgent. Is the universal idea of the human heart as representation of what is best in us, is this thing itself just wishful thinking? And then a sign cuts through the doubt.
I personally would default to skepticism because it is better to err on the side of caution. For me, a sign has to be pretty significant, otherwise I would explain it away. In the early part of the summer of this past year, I wondered to myself, why was I putting this energy towards this vlog? What impact could I really have? And it is just so difficult to break through to a critical mass of people anyway. Around this time, in early summer, I managed to catch a cold or a mild summer flu. I went to a drugstore to get some provisions, including some facial tissues for a runny nose. I chose a specific box because it had an ancient standing stone photograph on it. I've always been intrigued by ancient places and drawn to the mysteries they evoke. Here's what I saw and picked up.
Did you make that out? I know it was a quick flash, but you caught a glimpse perhaps. And what do you think it was? I anticipate that with just a brief glimpse, you would probably say Stonehenge. Sorry, that is incorrect.
Here, let me show you another image of the actual box. You might notice that these are not the smoother finished stones of Stonehenge. Rather, they are known as the Callanish stones on the Isle of Lewis, west of Scotland and north of Ireland. They are thought to be at least as old as Stonehenge and possibly older. Stonehenge images are pretty common. It would not be too unusual to see images of it. The Callanish stones, however, are photographed far less often. Maybe it is partly because they are harder to get to. Stonehenge is a day trip away from one of the world's premier cities, London, England. The Callanish stones require a lot more planning to go and visit.
So what is the big deal about that? About buying a box of facial tissues with some rarely photographed stones? That, in and of itself, is not a big deal, admittedly. But later that night, I encountered a big deal.
In the evening, as I was winding down, I had a question that I wanted to consult the world's most popular search engine with. I don't even remember the question now, and it's not important. Perhaps in my slumber I hit the wrong link, because what started to open was not Google, but Bing. I realized my error right away, and was about to go back to my intended search engine, but the page loaded, and I froze. There, staring back at me from the screen of my computer, was Bing's image of the day, the Callanish stones.
A sign? What do I make of this? These are the things I thought at the time. I've taken a couple of months to think about it. I have not related this story right away because it is the nature of my erring on the side of caution. But as I thought over and over about this happening, I cannot conclude in any other way than that some part of me needed a sign, and so I got one. I could go on and on about all of the thoughts that have gone through my head since this happening, but I'll leave the implications for another time. To make this vlog post a more manageable length, I'll simply leave with this thought. If you as a viewer trust my sincerity and have some familiarity with the arguments that I have been making regarding our living incomplete lives, like a caterpillar stuck in a cocoon, then perhaps you might temporarily suspend your own skeptical reflex, if you're inclined to have one, as I was forced to do myself. For I tried to think of the odds of this happening, and it seemed way too remote by far for mere coincidence. I have argued at times and reminded again of the need for humility. We cannot explain everything, and it is partly anxiety anyway that drives our need to try. But like Hamlet said to Horatio in the famous Shakespearean play, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. I'll leave it at that and say, with this, I feel strangely compelled.